Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Now this is basically a continuation of my review that I already did on Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. So, if you have not seen that movie and you plan on doing so, I highly recommend you end the video right now because there's gonna be spoilers. Alright, so we all know that at the end of Star Trek 2, Spock died. Now, that was a big shock for Star Trek fans back then, I'm sure. For me, I guess when I was a kid, I guess I was surprised, but I knew he's gonna come back. There's no way they just leave him dead there. Well, a sequel was made for Search for Spock, and already I knew, oh yeah, he's gonna come back. So, what happens in Star Trek 3? After the battle with Khan, the Enterprise is still damaged, and she's being flown back to Earth's space dock, which we see for the first time. And wow, it's a very cool looking station, all right. So Kirk is bitter about his best friend's death, and so it seems to be the entire crew of the Enterprise. It starts out with an overall pretty depressing mood. But that was to be expected. So the Enterprise arrives back at the space dock, supposedly deemed to be refitted, but instead, Kirk is being told by a Starfleet admiral that the Enterprise is supposed to be taken out of service permanently, because she supposedly is over 20 years old and would not be of any further use. Now, I don't want to criticize if 20 years is deemed long as a service for a starship, but the Enterprise didn't seem that old to me. It still used the same technologies as most of her vessels of the time, so I don't know. I don't know why they did that, but alright. So, and right at that point, we also see the new ship the Federation has been developing, the Excelsior class, which, just like the Miranda class from the last movie, would end up being probably one of the more, dare I say, overused starship designs for a Federation vessel. Seriously, what's Star Trek: The Next Generation? Excelsiors are everywhere. But anyway, so we're being introduced to the Excelsior, which is quite a cool looking ship. But it still keeps with the tradition. I always found that cool, that the ships we were introduced to, especially these first few movies, they looked like they belong into the Star Trek universe, yet they looked modern, they looked very detailed, which was very cool. I thought they found a well balance here, unlike that other ship from a new movie, which looked, I mean, just look at the engines, but anyway. So supposedly this Excelsior ship has a new engine, which is even faster than warp drive. Okay. And yeah, basically what happens, Kirk finds out that he has done something wrong. Spock's father, Sarek, is visiting him. Sarek would also end up making more appearances later on. He appeared once in the original show. Sarek tells Kirk that he did a mistake. He should have brought Spock to Vulcan, as he would have told him. But Spock never did that. So, someone else must have gotten that message. And yes, it was Bones. Spock conducted a mind meld with him right before he died. And now, basically, McCoy, aka Bones, has everything in his head that used to be in Spock's head. His experiences, his knowledge, it's all there. Sort of like his soul, you might say. That's what, more or less, how Sarek described it. So this movie has a lot to do with this whole mythic Vulcan stuff that may not resonate with a lot of people, but I thought it was interesting. Because the Vulcans, as far as we knew, were always very mysterious people, so I found it cool that some light was shed upon them. So, Kirk has to find a way to get back to the Genesis planet that was created at the end of the last movie. But unfortunately, the Federation has declared that planet a quarantine, and only research vessels are allowed to fly there, which the Enterprise obviously doesn't belong to, and she is deemed to be decommissioned anyway. So what happens? Kirk steals the ship, which is one of the most awesome scenes I've seen in a Star Trek movie. He just flies the damn ship out of a space dock with the Excelsior in pursuit, and the Excelsior's transwarp drive doesn't work. It's hilarious. Why? Well, Scotty was being posted on the Excelsior, and he sabotaged the engines. And after that, Starfleet never attempted transwarp again. Why? I don't know. I think if I were hell-bent on getting that new engine, I think I would have tried more than once, but that is a plot hole I'm not gonna further discuss. So they fly to the Genesis planet, and one last thing I have to talk about. I'm not gonna give away the climaxes here. The villains. Of course, most of the Star Trek movies but had a villain of some sort. In the last movie was Khan, and he was cool. But I think there was something that most people wanted ever since that opening scene of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. The Klingons. The Klingons were probably our favorite villains. Personally, I liked the Romulans more in the original series, mostly because they weren't that present. They were only used like once or twice, really not that often. But anyway, so the Klingons are back, and they have a new type of ship, the Klingon Bird of Prey, which also would end up being the most used Klingon vessel for the remainder of Star Trek. And yeah, so they're back. They somehow got received information about the Genesis device, and they want the scientists that worked on this, Dr. Marcus, who is Kirk's son, and Savick, both characters we were introduced to in the last movie. But when he sees a chance to get Kirk as well, he tries to take advantage of that. So that is basically the plot. One thing, these Klingons are very different from what we would see later on. I know this is something non-Star Trek fans may not relate to too much, but I just want to explain that real quick. These Klingons are being portrayed as greedy and selfish barbarians. Well, that is more or less how they were in the original show. It is not quite faithful to what we know with Klingons as later. These Klingons may look like the ones we know from the Next Generation later, but they're different. Whereas the future Klingons would value honor over everything, and they would never, backstab someone like a coward, unless they belong to the House of Duras. They wouldn't have done anything like this. These Klingons are rogues. They are, I do not like to see them as part of the official Klingon Empire. They had their own agenda. They weren't acting on anyone's behalf here. Which is very unfortunate in the end because of what events are to follow. But in order to understand the statement, you have to see the end of this movie, more or less. So that's the search for Spock. Not giving away the rest of the plot. What else can we talk about? The music is once again done by James Horner, who does an excellent job in my opinion. I especially like the new theme he came up with for the Klingons. Most of the music, like the theme of the movie, reminds me of The Wrath of Khan very much. That's because it is the theme from The Wrath of Khan, more or less. It's a variation on it. I thought for continuity's sake, that was pretty cool. Special effects were awesome. It's still models. Though there are not that many battle scenes, but it was still cool looking. The new models, like the Excelsior or the Klingon Bird of Prey, look gorgeous on screen, even for the Klingon Bird of Prey being such a rusty piece of junk. But yeah, it was all very, very cool looking. Also, the space dock, this huge mushroom-shaped station, was also very impressive to look at. So yeah, that's the search for Spock. You know, there is something that some people like to call the Star Trek movie curse. That, the even-numbered movies are the ones that good, like numbers 2 or number 4 and 6 and especially 8, they were all great. But that the odd numbered ones like 5 and 7 or 9, that were mostly underwhelming. Now I have to say that the number 3 is an exception. This movie is pretty good. Unfortunately, it's the follow-up to probably my favorite Star Trek movie, so of course expectations were high, very high for a sequel on this. So, I guess, think about the circumstances, they did all they could. I really like this movie. Though it is not as good as The Wrath of Khan, it is almost as good, and it definitely is very entertaining. However, unlike with the last movie, really watch the previous movie, otherwise you will not have any idea what's going on. That's that. So, my rating for The Search for Spock is an 8 out of 10. It's good. Pretty good. So, if you haven't seen this movie yet as a Trekkie, even though I find that unlikely, check it out. It may be odd numbered, but it's still pretty good.